So today, Vanessa Maney is going to take us through the latest results we've had from talking with and interviewing our customers over the last couple of months. So without further ado, I'll pass you to Vanessa, who's going to introduce herself and take you through the survey.
Thank you, Simon. So yeah, we're really excited to be able to share some of the hard work that we've been doing over the last, well, since lockdown actually. We were very keen to understand what impact COVID-19 has had on your business and therefore how we can actually support in the best way possible going forward. That view is very much shared by our CEO, Vic Crone, and our executive. And it was fascinating to hear from our customers, talk about COVID-19 and the impact, because they talk about it as, let's not waste a crisis. And it really resonated with our exec, because it's actually an opportunity for us to reshape our economy and for the future and going beyond just rebuilding existing industries. Amongst COVID-19 disruption, with the right support, we can make sure we can diversify our economy for emerging high-value sectors and to drive business growth over time. We know innovation and R&D are really critical to drive productivity, for sustainability and inclusion. And we want to make sure that we support, world-leading environmental, social, cultural and economic opportunities for ourselves going forward. And for us, it's really critical that we support businesses to start, to maintain and accelerate their R&D to make sure that we can actually work through this kind of recovery phase and help our customers, kickstart into the future. And interestingly enough, our customers agree with that. 98% of them actually said, we want to continue doing R&D going forward. And that sentiment has really been carried forward right from the beginning of lockdown to today. And so they're really, really clear about the challenges, which we are really listening to and trying to support in the best way possible. And this information is gold for us to be able to unite our ecosystem partners, government, to make sure we have the right interventions at the right time for the right type of business. So thank you for your feedback, and I hope that you continue to give us your views and thoughts going forward. Okay. So I'm going to take you through then the findings, but before we go into that, many of you who like methodology and how do we do this, it's important for us to kind of cover that first. And so going into the approach. So the initial approach when we did this work back in April, literally the first week of lockdown, our first priority was to understand the impact of COVID-19 on business and also, R&D intentions in the future. As we moved into sort of doing the next kind of wave, once we understood that a little bit more, we wanted to dig further around understanding what support initiatives were our customers actually leaning into, and therefore, were there any gaps that we needed to make sure we advocated on your behalf. The field work was actually done in April. So as I said, the first week in lockdown, we got quite a lot of responses. I think there was a lot of business owners, innovation managers who responded. 775 responses in the first wave, and wave 2 was a month later, and I think we were moving from one lockdown level to the next, so businesses were getting ready to actually start to be in business again, and so therefore we got about 474 for our wave 2. The good news is that sample size difference doesn't matter, because the results of both waves were still representative of the customers that we actually deal with every day, and so that's how a good sample works, and therefore the results are still significant and representative of the group that we try to represent. The type of information that we captured was really around, impact on cash flow, some of the challenges, support mechanisms that they were customers are using, and also appeal of potential new ones and how best to support in the future, as well as some demography and also matching some of that data to our CRM to make sure we didn't ask you questions that we already kind of knew about, which is good. And customer experience around this is really important too. So jumping straight into some of the results. This chart really shows us, the view around, what were some of those key challenges that our customers were facing with, obviously the lockdown levels, with how they were actually feeling the impact of COVID-19. And, half of them actually said that some of the restrictions in doing business was actually preventing them from continuing their R&D activity, which meant in the long run that they potentially had to delay launch of commercialization of their products and services. So any support associated with, freeing that up, making labs available, cash available, support with commercialization was really key. Underneath that, we also, measured what else was happening. And we found that, obviously the closure of markets was a significant impact, both in terms of national and international. A lot of our customers, as Simon knows, deal with, international customers. And not only that, also the impact on the supply chain. So you might have suppliers that reside locally, but also suppliers that actually reside internationally as well. So the impact of border closures was significant for our particular customers who do deal with that, more so than potentially some other, other businesses. So those were the key ones. We also asked them about opportunities. How were they placed in terms of leveraging opportunities in the future? And here we start to see comparisons between wave 1, which is the lighter green bar, and wave 2, which is the darker green bar. And what we're seeing is a movement closer to people saying that they were in businesses saying that they were in a much better position to leverage opportunities that to support the COVID response effort, or to solve for new problems that this potentially presented. The other key insight here is that just over 20% said that they were in a position to pivot their existing work or R&D to take hold of those new opportunities. So in effect, 65% of our customers were saying we are wanting to leverage new opportunities that COVID-19 actually presented, which is quite a positive view of the world. But of course, this is all dependent on cash flow, and cash flow can be a real fickle activity, and impact on any business. And so we're really mindful of trying to understand what does that mean in terms of running their business? What does that mean in terms of running their R&D? And clearly, business operations need to be funded well in order to enable R&D to actually occur. And that was some of the feedback that we got quite clearly from our customers. The good news here is that over the month, we actually saw a movement away from businesses saying that they felt cash flow constrained, and more towards those saying we're actually in a comfortable position, or actually we're in a good position now to continue our work. However, we're still mindful that a third of our customers are still in that kind of tight spot, and that's really important for us to keep in mind. There were some differences in the different groups of customers. Pre-revenue, low revenue customers who may have just started to commercialize their products were definitely the most vulnerable. And those are the ones that we've kept a close eye on, because their cash flow pressures actually increased over the month rather than necessarily decreased. This is where we see that difference when we look at cash flow runway pressure relative to revenue over a 12-month period. Again, those earning less than $300,000 per annum are the ones that are actually still, despite the 2-month measures, are still feeling the pressure. And so therefore, we have very much been advocating on your behalf on that, if you're sitting in that camp at the moment, to make sure that we have support, which Simon will talk about very shortly, to make sure that you can ride through this crisis into recovery. So therefore, the information that you just saw gave us a really amazing foundation to be able to build a bit of a grouping or triage group. So looking at our businesses, our customers focused on opportunities in the future, or actually hunkering down to set foundations for the current business, and how enabled are they to do this given their cash flow over time. And in order to understand this, we kind of looked at those dimensions, and we came up with 6 different groupings, and I will talk about those in a minute. And obviously over time we can see that this actually shifts as their cash flow position changes. The good news for us is the group that we call Accelerate, who are really seeking opportunities now, actually grew 8% over the month that we measured this. This particular group see themselves as actually seeking opportunities to help New Zealand have a really meaningful purpose to support the COVID recovery effort, and we're really trying to seek opportunities now for recovery and for the future. In terms of different skews of who might be sitting in here, we saw a little bit of a digital sector skew. Digital customers actually make up quite a bulk of our customer base, but we did see more of them sitting in this space. And then it's not surprising, as they were potentially not as affected as other industries in terms of reaching their customers. We also saw a skew here to medium and large businesses, earning more than $1 million per annum. Our largest Māori group, representing about 7% of this segment. And really what they wanted here in terms of support was, support to accelerate work and getting product to market quickly. So that meant in terms of releasing or supporting here in terms of R&D funding more than anything else, because they felt in a good position at this point in time. And of course, this can change as we go on. The other really good group we're seeing here, 17% of our customer base, is those that saying, hey, we are willing to pivot. We see opportunities coming in the future. And this has kind of remained fairly constant, I think 1% decline at 17%. This group really is about wanting to pivot work to capitalize on those opportunities because they can see them coming and they are still in a good position from a cash flow position. The types of businesses that we saw a bit of a skew here were late stage business, and really the main need here is, even though most of them said cash is king, what we are seeing is a need for responding to R&D projects, and also seeking government support to identify the problems that actually need to be solved for. So we can support in taking a leadership role here in identifying those for businesses to pivot on. The group on that yellow bubble, we called it Unshackle. And this was really one that was definitely seeking opportunities for the future, however, constrained by cash flow. Unfortunately, businesses that sit here primarily tended to be smaller, under 6 employee or pre-revenue, low revenue customers, or in the early stages of their R&D development. And so their main focus is, even though they wanted to either maintain or increase their R&D, they wanted support for what was more important, was to actually keep their business running. So therefore it could free up some resource to be able to dedicate to these opportunities that they had already identified, either now or coming in the future. The group named Strengthen, which is the orange bubble, represented 19%. We did see a slight decline of 2% over that 1 month period. And what characterized the feeling of this group was really about a feeling of uncertainty about the future. And even though they were unconcerned about cash flow at this minute, there was worries about potentially what was going to happen in September, what was going to happen in a couple of months' time. Potentially associated with when the wage subsidy is about to run out, and therefore we're going back to kind of normality. The skew here was really for mid-sized organizations, those already established or in the late stages of their R&D development, or already established organizations. Skews towards manufacturing, an agri-tech skew, and kind of niche sectors. When we looked at their R&D intentions, there was a mixed bag in terms of those that felt that they might park it until there was more certainty, those that intended to maintain, and those that also increase intentions to increase. And what they asked us here for support was really both around cash to run their business and also to run their R&D going forward, as well as advice around how to manage at the time, health and safety associated with, operating under different levels of lockdown, and an interest in understanding, the R&D tax incentive and how they could actually leverage that going forward. Our other two groups, which were a bit more of a concern, clearly sitting in the cash flow constraint segment of the model, was what we called the assess group, which were a little bit uncertain at this point about their business model. So that was about potentially sitting down and reassessing what the new path might be for their business, given some of the impacts that they were experiencing at the time. What characterized this group is medium-sized organizations, as well as sole traders. So that's under 19 staff, early stage startups with a slight skew to contract manufacturing, agri-tech again. And what they're asking for again here is cash to basically run their business first, and potentially looking into R&D, wanting to know a bit more about the tax incentive and see how they could actually leverage that for themselves. And the final group, the support group, was only 8%, and it did decline 4% from the previous month, which was quite reassuring to see. However, this group was really in crisis, and really wanting financial lifeline to basically keep the lights on. The types of businesses we're seeing here, a little bit of agri-tech, unfortunately, energy, and they're really looking, for cash again to support their business operations, and are looking to potentially pause their R&D in the short term, with potentially declines in the future over the next 12 months. So what are we seeing in terms of the types of support that businesses or our customers are currently leaning into? And the wage subsidy has really been leveraged by the majority of our customers, 73% saying that they're actually taking advantage of this. So we believe this has been a real financial cushioning to enable our customers to come out of this a bit unscathed. But the reality will hit further down the line when we actually have to stand on our own 2 feet. And then there was a myriad of other support mechanisms that some of you have also leaned into. For example, our business advisory funding, which was run through our regional business partners, which is really about funding to support, business advice, which some of you have done, especially if you're looking at rethinking your business strategy and business model. That provided a really great opportunity to fund that kind of thinking, strategic thinking. Or if you're thinking about digitizing your business a bit more, using technology to improve efficiencies, then that also supported those kinds of conversations and that kind of expertise as well. It was great to see that 15% leaned into the small business cash flow loan scheme. And Simon will talk a bit more about some loans going forward in terms of our R&D loan, which has been launched recently. And really the conversation here really was about trying to get cash into your hands quickly to either support business ops or to support R&D, which some of our growth grant customers also leveraged in terms of some of the early claim opportunities that we had offering at that time. We wanted to understand, was this really cutting the mustard in terms of being enough? Do we need to do more? And so we asked some questions associated with satisfaction of government support as a whole, mainly because Callaghan Innovation is just one of the cogs across many of our ecosystem partners that actually supports innovation and R&D. So it's really important that we work together with our agency partners to support as best possible. It was really heartening to see that was very few that said they were dissatisfied with overarching support associated with business operations. However, we've got a little bit of work to do in terms of making sure that we have the right support for for R&D going forward. And so we have been working really hard to do that. And Simon will take you through some of the initiatives that we've actually got in play, both across for ourselves in terms of what we've got to offer and what our ecosystem partners also have in play to support this activity. The other key area that we're quite mindful of is that when dealing with government, it's not always easy. And as far as we can, we try to react as fast as we could to make sure we have these initiatives in play. And that the experience of finding this, evaluating that this actually helps your business and accessing these easily is as equally important as the actual support in itself. I was heartened to see that we haven't been doing too badly, but of course there's always room for improvement in making sure that our customer experience is as easy and as frictionless as we can actually get it. Clearly we can still do some work across all of these areas, in particular making sure that it's really easy for you to evaluate what actually works for your business. And of course, we wanted to see, what are the long-term R&D intentions, how well you were actually placed. And over time, over that month period, again, we saw a shift really across all of our different customer types, from early stage to late stage to, pre-revenue and later stage organizations, towards either remaining the same in terms of the spend over the next 12 months, or even actually thinking about increasing this significantly, which is really, I'm quite heartened by that, because we know how important R&D is and innovation to make sure we, as I mentioned earlier, building that future for ourselves that is not necessarily a replica of the past, but an opportunity to kickstart something different for the future. And there was really just a view of trying to understand if there were any differences across R&D intensity of organizations between May and April. And I think in April, what we saw here is a bit of a conservative view of what might happen to R&D spend. So that's the chart on the right-hand side, where we did see, especially the larger organizations who, spending $1 million or more on R&D, saying, look, I actually don't know what's going to happen. And I think that was an initial reaction to going into lockdown so quickly. And we took a measure literally days after that, is that they were saying, gosh, how long is this going to last? How long are we going to be in play here? What does it necessarily mean in terms of our, our funding, our revenues? And so there was a bit of uncertainty. Once organizations and businesses got a feel for what this was really about, I think there was a better assessment of where they were placed. And therefore we are seeing a bit more optimistic views of, hey, actually, we're going to maintain our levels of R&D. And for some of them, we're still thinking of increasing those. And again, that's quite a heartening position. But we still know that we need to support, because that's an area where you've said to us that that's where you want to see more from us. So therefore, what is it that Callaghan Innovation and ecosystem can support here? This is where we got some feedback from you around what's important. First and foremost, cash is king, and that's still coming through really loud and clear from us. Funding for business is important. 49% of you saying that's actually still needed, and there's a kind of appetite for wage subsidy extension, and also those pre-revenue, low revenue businesses saying, hey, we kind of missed out initially, yes please. And I know there's been some work to rectify that, to allow those types of businesses to actually enter into that support. The other key area was really around acknowledging that it's important to continue to support New Zealand Inc. And that came in a lot of different types of feedback in terms of campaigns to support buying local, promoting a COVID-free position. I know that's changed a little bit, but we're still doing well. Those people are in isolation. So we're still pretty much, in terms of from a community perspective, in that position. Making sure that government also play their part in procuring local, and that we help with through that kind of buying local procurement, communication and campaigning. Regulation, tax and regulation relaxation was also something that came through. And that was really in relation to border control, in terms of making sure that we support freeing up where it's needed and maybe tightening up where it's needed to make sure we do keep our COVID-free position. You know, tax regulation changes to free up some more cash as needed. And the next really key bucket was really around R&D funding, and that is the key idea that came through here was subsidised R&D services, which we are definitely working on, plus our R&D loan, which I believe has just been made available last week or this week. And another key area where Callaghan Innovation is very much sees itself playing and supporting is through coaching and upskilling. We do run, you know, a number of different programs where we can support this, but the key areas where you've told us that was important was around, you know, how do I make sure that whatever I'm launching to market and commercializing really hits the mark. So that's about, you know, product to market fit, which we are working on releasing something shortly, and business strategy. So we're rethinking whether the model kind of works in today's environment and kind of changing that. That was an area that you said you wanted more support. Access to capital. We know it's hard to get funding. So how do we then support you to put your best foot forward to, you know, when you're asking for funds? Business efficiency is another key area, and we do recognize that, you know, moving forward, having an organization and a business that is more digitally enabled has become, I think, the talk of the town, and it's important that we do leverage technologies that we have available and even push the boundaries of those to make things a lot easier for ourselves. And then some support associated with, you know, managing supply chains and logistics, given some of the changes in the nature of what COVID-19 has meant for business. So those are the areas of coaching and upskilling that you've asked us to kind of work on. And Simon will talk about some of those that are in the pipeline and those that are already available. And last but not least is connecting. And that's making sure that we can support you to connect to all the right expertise, to the right investors and funding. And that's definitely something that we've been doing over the last year and a half with the launch of Scale Up, which very much plays a really pivotal role in that space, as well as our innovation managers who also, you know, personally connect you to others in the ecosystem. And Scale Up is obviously a digital way and a very efficient way to do that as well. So I would recommend looking at that if you haven't already. What I'm going to do now is really hand over to Simon, who really talk about, you know, what have we done with this information? Because it's nice to know that we are listening, and we are listening, but it's also important to know what have we done as a result, and how does this then show up and useful support where you need it the most.
Thanks, Vanessa. So yeah, Vanessa's just done a great summary of what's obviously some very detailed and thorough research of our customers. So what I'm going to quickly do now is just sort of sum up, you know, what the main outcomes of that were and basically what are we doing about it. So there's 6 key areas that Vanessa's already highlighted. The first one's business funding. You can see here on the slide we've got 3 examples, if you like, of where government has tried to support business. The wage subsidy, the small business cash flow loan, and the business finance guarantee being 3 examples. So these aren't directly in Callaghan's wheelhouse. We're obviously the innovation agency, so these 3 areas are managed elsewhere. But we have used the survey data, and we've shared it with agencies and with ministers, and that's resulted in, for example, the wage subsidy being extended in 2 ways. Firstly, in time, companies said they needed it for longer, and that's been provided. And secondly, wider scope, so now available for pre-revenue companies as well. So that's been a really important direct result of this great work, the survey that Vanessa's done. The second key area that customers asked support for was funding for R&D, and that very much is in our wheelhouse, of course, core to what we do. So Vanessa already alluded, we've just launched a new product called the R&D loan. That's where businesses can get a no interest for the first year, and then low interest beyond that for up to $400,000 New Zealand dollars to be spent on R&D. So we've just literally launched that. So if you're interested, again, go to our website and check it out. The R&D tax incentive, of course, that was brought in pre-COVID, but what we've done there is we've extended, again, the applicability of that incentive. So again, pre-revenue companies can now access that, and there's some other mechanisms of tax support around R&D as well. For our sort of core products like the project grant and the growth grant, we've made a number of changes to make it easier. So project grants, obviously there's been a lot of changes with people doing research due to the COVID-19 crisis. So we've made variations a lot easier to get in terms of time and speed. The growth grant, you're able to apply at the start of the quarter before you actually spend the money rather than have to wait to the end of the quarter. So again, it's been there to help companies through these tough times. And lastly, there's been additional funding put into specific areas. One example being the COVID-19 Innovation Acceleration Fund, which Callaghan administered in partnership with MB. And that's obviously to drive R&D into projects that can help dealing with the COVID-19 crisis directly. So a third area that you asked support for was around focusing on New Zealand Inc. and procurement. So Vanessa referred to Scale Up NZ, which is kind of like a Tinder for companies where you're looking for investment and innovation. It's an online platform and really encourage you to use that. So that's obviously focusing on New Zealand companies. And generally speaking, you know, there's been a number of New Zealand Inc. campaigns, but for Callaghan, it's all about working with New Zealand companies. So you can't be a customer of ours unless you're a New Zealand registered company. And we're obviously all about trying to boost those New Zealand companies. So that's kind of core to what we do. Tax and regulation, again, this will be mainly administered by other good folks like the IRD. But I've already referred to the R&D tax incentive. We have partnered really closely with the IRD on that and will continue to do so and have continued to sort of, I guess, open that up, make it available for more folks, as I've already described. And there's a bunch of other initiatives that the government's put in that are listed there on the slide. And the fifth key area for us is coaching. And again, you guys have said to us, hey, we need a lot more help in this area. And we've been doing that for a while now. A couple of our core programs are listed there around helping companies innovate smarter and better using techniques like agile and design thinking. Capital education is a program we launched probably about 18 months ago, and that's to help early stage founders learn more about how to raise capital. And of course, you know, during these times, that's really important. And so we've been really happy to relaunch that recently more on a digital platform to make it more accessible for our customers. And then coming down the pipeline, and pretty much a direct response to the great survey work that Vanessa's done, is a number of new initiatives. So one around product market fit. So you do all this great innovation, but then, you know, what happens to it? How do you get it to be successful commercially? So that will be hopefully launched in the next month or two. We're working really hard on that. Number of other areas, for example, regulation and digital preparedness that we're also working on. And we don't want to forget our RBP, as we call them, the Regional Business Partner Network, a core partner for us in terms of kind of being like the agent for Callaghan Innovation and New Zealand Trade and Enterprise Services out in the regions. And they've been boosted to the tune of around $25 million to help with that advisory piece for companies out in the regions or the rural areas. And last but not least, you asked for more assistance around connecting. That comes back to Scale Up NZ. We keep mentioning that, but it's such a good digital tool in these different areas. Government's also been really active in industry-specific packages. We like these fancy pants names, industry transformation plans or ITPs. So the first cab off the ranks being the Agritech ITP. Something I'm involved with, and that's really about boosting industry within those specific areas and how can government help to support that. And Vanessa's already mentioned the good work that our customer-facing team do every day in terms of helping connect customers And that's really stems from the fact we work with everyone from one-person startups all the way to Fonterra. We work really closely with the R&D community, investors, especially through our startup program, and other stakeholders, including government agencies. So if we can't answer the question directly, we normally know who's who in the zoo to help find that answer. And linked very strongly into that is the RBP network, as I've just described. So that's really it. That's the 6 key areas that came out of the survey, and that's what we're either doing now or working on in the near or distant future. And I'll pass back to Vanessa to sum up.
Sure. So we do really encourage you to, if you have never heard some of these, to actually in our pack, which we will actually share that with you. It'll be live on our website after this webinar. So that's www.callaghananovation.govt.nz. That pack actually has a little bit more information. And what we've done is we've linked all of these specific initiatives with their website links, so that you've got readily available access to those if you want to find more information. And if you do have a Callaghan Innovation Manager, then reach out to have a chat as well. We're going to go into Q&As, and so we're going to give you a little bit of time to start to type in your questions. Again, Simon mentioned at the beginning that there are 2 buttons on the bottom of your screen. One is a Q&A button, one is a chat button. Use a Q&A button because that will come straight to Simon, who will field those questions. So I will answer the survey ones, and Simon will answer anything to do with some of our initiatives, and we also have some experts on the line who will help us answer some questions. As I mentioned earlier, lean into the support as identified in the content that we're giving to you. And the other thing to note is it's really important for us to keep a finger on the pulse on the experiences that our customers are currently having, to make sure that we are here to help in the best way possible. So we will be doing another measure, again, and only a 10-minute survey in July. So if you can actually support us through that, it'll be much appreciated. Thank you. So back to Q&As.
Cool.
Do we have any?
Yes, we do. So that's a great start. I've got one here just around the growth grant. So question around, can you apply at the beginning of the quarter from an ongoing basis? So let me just explain first what I meant by that for those who aren't quite clear. So what used to happen with the growth grant is at the end of a quarter, you would table up all your R&D spends, send it to us, and then we would co-fund that invoiced amount 20%. What we've done due to the COVID crisis to help with cash flow is say, look, you forecast to us what you think you're going to do over that quarter, send us the bill, and we'll pay it up front. And obviously we will, then do the table up at the end. So as I understand it, that is going to continue. Obviously the growth grant finishes in March 21, and we'll transfer everyone who wishes to onto the R&D tax incentive. In fact, customers have already done that. So as I understand it, that will continue until March, and we would let you know if that isn't the case. Okay, so hopefully I answered that for you, Lynn. Just a question I've got actually for Vanessa. If you want to tell us a little bit more about the survey in July, is that going to be kind of like a continuation of what we've done, or are we also going to ask some new things? Take us through that.
Yeah, so we're still designing what that will look like, but it's definitely to continue to understand the ongoing impact of COVID-19, especially cash flow. We know that that's an ongoing conversation. It doesn't just end, with one measure, and it's ongoing management for our customers. So we're really, really keen to see how that's actually changing. If you remember that quadrant that we posted earlier, what are those movements kind of look like? Also from a support perspective, do we still have the right stuff? And what else do we need to do to make sure that our services, not just the new ones that we've created, but also our old ones, are they still relevant, and what's the experience been like as well? Cool.
No, that's really cool. I've got a great question here just around moving to more sort of digital technology, especially around education. And, are we seeing more of that? The short answer is yes. So our digital team work with a number of customers in that area, and we co-fund those customers to develop R&D programs. And in case of eating your own dog food, we have started to do that here in Callaghan as well. So we've actually partnering with some digital education providers to help us with our programs and services to provide more digital versions of them. And we've already done that for our capital education program. So the concept here is what we hope in the future is we'll have like a one-to-all. We'll have online material for our customers in relevant areas. We'll do one-to-many in the form of either digital or physical workshops. And then we will partner with providers, the experts in those areas, to do more one-on-one stuff with customers. So yeah, the short answer to that question is yes, definitely an acceleration of that, both from our own point of view and also from our customers. So yeah, cool question, thank you. Another question I've got here is, do you assist startups that plan to bootstrap? That's a good question. So the way it works at Callaghan in the past has been a co-funding model. So what that means is, yes, we will support companies that don't have external capital, but they have to have some capital to match the co-funding, if that makes sense, right? Because, I mean, to be frank, it's not really tenable for government to use taxpayers' money to fund companies that don't have some form of financial backing as well. Saying that, there's a range of different options open to startups who are wanting to predominantly use bootstrapping. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that. But yeah, we work with a lot of companies that have not gone to external capital markets. They've got seed capital internally or through the 3 Fs, friends, fools, and family. And we're really keen to work with them to help them get started in that journey and build and from there. Just one thing to add to there, we have a little support mechanism called a Getting Started grant that our RVPs use. That's really popular for early stage startups, people who are looking to bootstrap. So that's definitely an area. Okay, what else have we got here? Okay, do I need to go through Callaghan Innovation to get a wage subsidy as a pre-revenue? The short answer is, I think, is no. I'm pretty certain now the wage subsidy is set up to deal with all pre-revenue and normal revenue companies. But if not, I'm going to be corrected by someone looking very darkly at me. And how can we get resources to lab work cost effectively to support innovative solutions? Yeah, so there's a couple of different avenues there. One is obviously on the funding side, so we can help fund you to do your R&D, which can give you access to those facilities. We also know, this comes to the connecting piece, who is out there who has those resources, either someone who can, do fee-for-service type work, so a lot of R&D organisations will help you there, or there's a lot of shared workspace areas. There's one just up the road here called Level 2, where there's a lot of, say, biotech companies in the same sort of area, and they quite often share resources. And so potentially there's mechanisms to work in with organisations like that, and they're looking to expand too, which is really cool. Thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate there's a lot of these things going on. We will make this all available, I believe, on the website, so please feel free to share. I mean, one of the key messages from my point of view is that you have been listened to. We can continue to do this work to make sure that you get listened to, and hopefully you have seen that some of the good work that Vanessa and team have done has now resulted in us providing more support for companies and doing more things that are helpful for you. So yeah, as Vanessa said, lean in, send us feedback, answer the next survey. That's always a good way to get your feedback in. And we're really happy to share that across government. One of the things about Callaghan, especially in the last probably 6 to 12 months, is we've become a lot more connected within government. And government looks to us because we're talking to you guys, customers and industry, for feedback on what they need to do, even from a policy perspective. And I think you'll see more of that, which is really cool. So that's all I've got to say. Vanessa, do you want to
Thank
say
you. No,
anything?
I just want to thank you. Thank you for giving us your feedback, and it's been absolutely gold for us.